So I'm sure most of you have heard of or even used ChatGPT because ChatGPT is a technology that's been really popular these days, ever since it came out. But if you don't know what it is, it's basically just a virtual text-based assistant that's online. And today we're going to be connecting it to Python using its API and connecting it to Twitter so that you can have a virtual Twitter assistant in Python. So first of all, what are we going to do in today's video? Well, first of all, I'll introduce to you guys what ChatGPT is and some use cases of how you can use it. Then I'll show you guys what IFT is, which is the technology we're going to be using, and what webhooks are, just so that we can connect Twitter to our ChatGPT technology. And then finally, we'll get straight into the interactive demo in which we'll work with ChatGPT and Twitter and Python. Alright, so first of all, what is ChatGPT? So like I talked about earlier, it's a very viral AI chatbot that will produce human quality responses. You can ask it to do virtually anything that a virtual assistant can do, and it'll produce to you very human-like responses. And it's being used in all sorts of places, from school to workplace to generating content, things like that. And it's very useful in all aspects. So let's talk about some use cases. And there's obviously a lot more use cases for ChatGPT, but I've just grouped them into four main groups. So first of all is content creation. So this will mean that ChatGPT will create any content you want it to. Like for example, let me just open up, this is ChatGPT's website. For example, if I ask it to write me an essay about anything, how about rhinos? Okay, write me an essay about rhinos. Then it'll produce all of this content by itself, and it'll give you different content every single time you ask the same thing. So as you can see, rhinos are majestic creatures. It's giving a whole human-like response of an essay about rhinos. So yeah, so that's ChatGPT creating content creation. Then the next use case for ChatGPT is research and knowledge. This will work as ChatGPT can also work as like a search engine. Just like Google, you can search up whatever you want. Just like that, you can also ask ChatGPT stuff. Like for example, okay, let's let it finish that essay. As you can see, it's writing the whole essay by itself. Okay, so you can also use it as like a search engine to research stuff. For example, let's say I want to ask what color is a rhino? Is a rhino. And even if you have spelling errors and stuff, it'll still see past that because it's an AI, it knows it. So as you can see, it's giving this research-based response. So what color is a rhino? It's saying it's gray. Alright, so there we go. Then it can also do things like assisting in creativity. For example, let's say you want to ask ChatGPT something creative that a human would produce. And most of the times, robots or computers aren't that creative. But if we ask ChatGPT, for example, tell me a joke about anything. How about, maybe let's just go with rhinos. Tell me a joke about rhinos. Then see so it's giving us a whole joke just about rhinos. So it's using its own creativity. So ChatGPT is also producing creative responses that are human-like. So this is these three examples are, this is proving why it's so viral. It's producing very good responses for all of these stuff. And finally, you can also develop apps in code. If you ask it to code you something in any programming language, it'll also do that too. And I'll show you guys an example of that later. So yeah, those are some use cases on ChatGPT, but now how are we going to connect it to Twitter so that we can make our own Twitter assistant? What I'm planning on doing is, we're going to be connecting. Well, we can do that with a technology called IFT. And IFT stands for if this then that. That's why it's spelled so weirdly. So basically all that means is, it's a website that can connect many different apps and devices together to do specific actions based on a trigger. For example, in this case, we want it to do, whenever we type out a question or something, then this technology, it should take the output from ChatGPT and put it into Twitter so that we can have our own Twitter chatbot. Then it can also do things like event notifications and responses, and it can connect a bunch of technologies together. In this case, we want to connect our Python technology, in which we're going to have our ChatGPT response, and we want to connect that to Twitter. So let's get into the demo to do that. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go to Python. I'm going I'm going to go to Atom over here so that I can actually do my coding. And first of all, let's just start writing our program. Okay, so here's the architecture of the project. Basically, the user will have, in the terminal, it'll ask them, what's your question? In the terminal, it'll ask the user, what's your question? And then you can type it out, you can type out your question in terminal, and then it should print out the response from ChatGPT. It should connect to ChatGPT and get the output of that question. And then it'll take that response and then print it out and post it to Twitter using all of our combined technologies. Alright, so first of all, before we connect Twitter to it, I'm just going to connect ChatGPT to Python so that we can have a ChatGPT inside of Python. So instead of asking it in ChatGPT's website, I can just ask it in the terminal. So how I'm going to do that is by importing our modules first of all. So the first and only module we need for ChatGPT is import OpenAI, because OpenAI is the company that created ChatGPT. So first, I'm just going to import OpenAI, and then the next thing we need to get is an OpenAI API key. So what we're going to do is go to OpenAI's website. So I'm going to go to openai.com, click API, and then we have to log in. And then I'm going to log in with my account that I'm using for ChatGPT. And then here we go. It's saying, welcome to OpenAI. And then we're going to click on my profile picture up here. And then as you can see, it says view API keys here at the top right corner. So I'm going to click view API keys. And then as you can see, it takes me to a page here that says API keys. And then we have all of our secret keys. So here, just for the sake of this video, I'm going to create a new secret key and then I'll delete it after. So don't try using my key. So I'm going to press create new secret key, and it only shows this key once, so you have to make sure you copy it. So I'm going to click the copy button here and then press OK. And then I'm going to go back to Atom and put it into a variable. Actually, we don't even need to put it into a variable. We can just use the OpenAI module and then say OpenAI.API_key equals to, and then we'll add our key. Now this will just tell the OpenAI module that here's the key, and then we'll associate it with that module. So then here I'm going to add our key in, and then as we've copy pasted it, now it's associating this API key with our OpenAI Python module. So now we have all of the credentials we need. Now we can just set up whatever model we want and the prompt, which is the actual user's question. So first of all, there's multiple models that OpenAI has, but in this case, we're going to use a variable called model_engine, and then we're going to provide whichever model we want. In this case, the latest version of ChatGPT, it's called text-DaVinci -003. And then that's just the model, that's just the name of the model for ChatGPT. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is actually generate the response. So in order to generate the response, all we need to do is provide the prompt and then actually tell OpenAI to run this prompt into ChatGPT's model. So first of all, let's add an input so that the user can actually input the prompt into terminal. So I'm going to make a variable called prompt equals, and then I'm going to use the input function. This input function will allow users to type in user input into the terminal. And then now let's say for the input, we'll just say enter your question here. Okay, and then this will allow users to type in their question, and then whatever they type in will be stored in the prompt variable. Then finally, we have to tell OpenAI or ChatGPT to return us a response based on this prompt variable. So I'm going to make a variable called completion, which will be just OpenAI running the prompt, and then we'll print out this completion variable. So I'm going to say completion equals OpenAI, which is our variable, dot completion, which is a function, and then we're going to use the create function. Now this create function will run whatever model we want and whatever text we have as the question. So in this case, we need a couple parameters. First parameter is engine, and this engine would be the model engine variable. So I'm going to say engine is model engine, and then prompt equals to, and then whatever the question you want. In this case, since it's dynamic, we're going to have the prompt variable. So prompt equals prompt, and then there's a couple more parameters, but there's a couple more parameters that you'll just need to enter in. So next is max underscore tokens. And then for the max tokens, we want it to be 1024. And then we're just going to say n is equal to 1. Stop is equal to none. And then temperature is equal to 0.5. Now, these parameters were just other things that we needed to input. And this temperature parameter, this is for the amount of randomness you want it to be. So for example, if you just kept on asking the same question, if you wanted to have the same you would change the temperature. So now we have this completion variable, which has actually given our prompt to the ChatGPT model. And now we want to print out the actual results. So I'm going to say response is equal to completion, which is our variable that we just created, dot choices with an index of 0 dot text. This is just getting the raw output from it instead of whatever else it might have. And then finally, we can just print out the response. Now, what we've done is we've successfully connected to our OpenAI account using a secret key that we've just had here, the API key. And then we've defined the model engine along with our prompt being user input. And then with that, we've gotten a response and we've printed it out based on the user's prompt. So let's actually test this out. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to terminal here. Let me just open it up here and then clear. Okay, so now the first thing we need to do before we actually run this is we need to download all of our modules and we need to create a virtual environment. So to create a virtual environment, you need to say Python 3, and this will change based on your operating system, but for Mac, it's Python 3 -m, venv, and then whatever you want to call it. In this case, I always call my virtual environments env. So then it's going to create the virtual environment for me, and it should have created a folder here, yeah, env. And then we want to actually activate the virtual environment so that we're in it. So how we can do that is saying source env/bin /activate, and then this will activate our virtual environment, and you can see on the terminal screen here it's activated as it says env here. Now if we install all of our modules, then it'll install inside of the virtual environment. So the first module I want to install is OpenAI, and then it's collecting and it should download the module. Then once it's done, okay, there we go. So I'm going to clear. So I'm just going to say Python 3 and then our file name, which in this case is ift.py. And then if we run it, okay, now it's asking us enter your question here. Let me just say, tell me a joke. Now it should get from the ChatGPT, it should connect to ChatGPT, ask it, tell me a joke, and then get the response and print it out here. So let's press enter and then, yeah. Okay, so there we go. It's giving us a joke. And then let's run this again and ask it like a research-based question. Maybe, what color are giraffes? All right, giraffes are typically a lighter, yeah. So there we go. It's worked using ChatGPT's API. So yeah, there we go. We've successfully connected to ChatGPT using Python so that we have a Python-based text assistant. Now the next step for this is to connect it to Twitter so that it'll post these results, what it's printed out, it'll post that on Twitter, just so that we can have even more connection through technologies. All right, so to connect to Twitter, I'm going to use a technology called IFT. So I'm going to go to IFT's website by saying IFTTT.com. And then, wait, we don't want this, just ift.com. And then, yeah, so you're going to have to create your own project. But basically, now what I need to do is I need to create a thing called an applet. And applets will allow us to connect multiple different technologies together. In this case, I want to connect our Twitter to Python. So I'm going to press create here, and then here it's letting us create an applet. So now, first of all, there's two parts to any applet. First of all, there's a trigger, and then there's an event. Now, the trigger is just saying whenever something happens, then it should connect to this technology and do something. In this case, there's not going to be a specific trigger other than whenever you run the Python program or whenever the user enters a question. So for this, I'm going to add a service called Webhooks. And as you can see, there's a bunch of services and technologies you can connect to. But here, I'm going to search up Webhook. And then this will just allow us to wrap our applet into an API, into an API that you can call from our Python program. So now here you can say receive a web request. So whenever you receive a web request through our Python program, then that'll be the trigger, and we'll trigger this in our Python program. So now for the web request, maybe I'll say ChatGPT_Python. I'll just call that the event name, and then that'll be our trigger here. And then when we connect to our other technology, now we want to connect it to Twitter so that whenever the user enters in their question, it should post the result on Twitter. So here I'm going to connect it to Twitter, and here post a tweet. That's what we want to do. And then for the Twitter account, I'm going to use my Twitter account. And then here for the tweet text, I'm going to add our, we don't want to do the event name, which is just ChatGPT Python. In this case, we want to add another. I'm going to take that out. And in IFT, you can either have dynamic text or just static text. So for our tweet text, let's add, and I want it to tweet out the text that is returned from ChatGPT, but that's in our Python program. How are we going to get our Python program variable into IFT? Well, whenever we call the API or the webhook here in IFT in Python, we can also add some JSON data along with it. And in that JSON data, we could add the output of our ChatGPT. So here you can see we have event name, and then we have value 1, value 2, and value 3. These are 3 values you can add in your JSON data while you're calling the API of IFT. So I'm going to add value 1 here, and then maybe sent by ChatGPT and Python. Okay, so now it should add whatever we have in our value 1 when we're calling the API, and then it'll also say sent by ChatGPT in Python. Alright, so then we'll press create action here, and then we'll press continue here, and then finish. So now whenever we call this API, we have to get the API first, but whenever we call this API, then it should post a tweet to my Twitter here. So now how do we get the API details so that we can actually call it? Well, I'm going to go to another site in IFT. It's called ifttt.com/makerwebhooks. And then here, this will allow us, this is kind of like the documentation for webhooks. And then I'm going to press documentation here, and that'll take me to my custom API key and my API that I can call in my Python program. So in this case, we're going to want to call our Python. We want to call that API into our Python program somewhere over here. And to call any API, we're going to have to import another library, which is the requests library. And the requests library is just for calling any sort of API with JSON data. So I'm going to import requests here, and then in the IFT section, now we can also create our API call and our JSON data. So here I'm going to copy this. I'm going to change my event name. So if you remember back in IFT, we created an event name called ChatGPT_Python, I believe. Let me just check that actually. Okay. Yeah, let's check this. ChatGPT_Python. So here inside of the URL, we're going to add that same thing, ChatGPT_Python. And then if we call this URL with our JSON data, then it'll actually run and post the tweet. But we want to run this in Python. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say requests.post, and then here this will post a request, and here this will call a API in post, and here this will call a post API for us. In this case, the API we want to call is this, but we also need to add some JSON data of what the actual responses, so that's what we'll tweet. So here in the other parameter, we can also say data equals to, and then you can either add the JSON data here, but just to make it simpler, I'll make another variable. I'll just call this variable JSON. So I'm going to say data equals JSON here, and then we'll create the JSON variable. So JSON equals to, and then here I'm going to add my JSON data. So how you have to do this is, if you remember, we added in IFT, we added our value 1 is going to be, we added value 1, which is, we added our value 1 to be tweeted, and we have to make this value 1 some sort of data. In this case, we'll make the value 1 data as the response, because that's what we want to tweet. So here I'm going to say value 1 is, and then we'll have a response variable. So response, which is what we were printing out earlier. And then here, after that, we also have to add in value 2. Even though it's empty, we'll just keep it as some empty text. Actually, you can say value 2 as the empty text. And then finally, value 3. And then finally, value 3 will be equal to... You have to add all these values, even if you keep them as empty. You have to add them. So then value 3 is equal to value 3. Alright, and then now we have all of our JSON data that will be called when we're calling our webhook here. So now what it should do is, it should take all of our data that we have. It should take all of the data, which is just the output from our ChatGPT, and post that to Twitter since we created a webhook in IFT, and we're calling it using our requests library. So let's test this out. Okay, so I'm going to go back to terminal and then run the program again. And then here I'm going to say, and for the question, maybe, where do rhinos live? Alright, then now it should print out the response. Oh, alright, it's saying that model does not exist. Let's see this. Oh, okay, I seem to have, in the model, I seem to have accidentally typed a space. Let's just clear that and run it again. That was just a spelling error. Okay, so then I'll do the same thing. Where do rhinos live? Rhinos live. And then now it should print out the response. And then, yeah. Okay, so it printed out the response. So let's go to Twitter and check this. So I'm going to go to my Twitter page. And then it should have posted by now. Yeah, so there we go. It's saying rhinos live in Africa and Asia. In Africa, okay, so that's the whole response. And then it says and then it says sent by ChatGPT in Python, like we told it to in IFT. So there we go. That worked. All right, now I'm going to delete this tweet because I don't want it to like show up there forever. But yeah, there we go. It successfully tweeted using IFT and Python. Now, if we want to take it a step further, all it was posting was just the output. But let's say we wanted to post like the question that we wrote and the output. How we can do that is by adding another value. So maybe we'll put like Q and A. Okay, so then first of all, we'll have a question, which is what we entered. So in this case, we're going to have to add another ingredient, which is value 2. And then in value 2, I can put the prompt maybe, because the prompt is whatever the user enters in. So then here for value 2, instead of having some empty string, I'll add our prompt variable, because the prompt variable is whatever the question the user enters. So in my Twitter page, I wanted to post like Q is and then whatever the user entered as their question. And then for A, which is the answer, it'll have value 1, which is the answer that ChatGPT entered. And then it'll say sent by ChatGPT in Python. And then let's update this action and then update. And then yeah, it says applet updated, so let's test it out again. All right, I'm going to go back to Python and then clear this, rerun it. Okay, now let's add a different question. Maybe, where do dolphins live? I'm just asking random questions. You can ask anything you want. Oh, there's a spelling error. Actually, let's keep the spelling error. I just want to see what happens. Hopefully it looks, yeah. Okay, so it looks past this spelling error because it's an advanced AI. But yeah, it's printed it out here. And in Google Chrome, if I reload my Twitter page, let's see. Yeah, all right, there we go. So it's saying Q, where do dolphins live? A, and then dolphins live in ocean, seas, and other large bodies. Yeah, that's the answer. And then it says sent by ChatGPT in Python. So as you can see, it also enters in our question that we entered. Exactly the same. So there we go. That's worked. We've successfully created a Twitter assistant using ChatGPT and Python. So that was connecting ChatGPT and Python along with IFT services so that we could create our own text assistant with Python. Now, I really do think ChatGPT is really interested, and I will make a couple more videos about ChatGPT and Python, so stay tuned for those. Thanks very much for watching. If y'all had any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to help you out if you're stuck with any ChatGPT Python questions or issues. Please like, subscribe, all that jazz. Until then, you can learn anything.